Jill, thank you so much for being my guest. I'm so excited.
I am too. I think.
You are such a rock star in this business. And I mean, I think you're the most like decorated, awarded commercial real estate broker owner, like of any. I mean, the list of your accomplishments is so long. It's super impressive.
Yeah, we try to keep those mounting.
So
you gotta nominate yourself sometimes, right?
Right. Well, I mean, still, it's just really impressive, all of the things that you've accomplished. I remember meeting you, gosh, I don't know, 25 years ago or more, and you were leasing space at Pentagon Office Park, and like my husband would refer to you as a machine. Like you were doing like 1,000 deals a day. Like, I mean, how'd you get into this business?
Well, that was probably halfway through my career.
Really?
So when I was going to college at the University of Minnesota, I actually took a part-time job at Thorpe Brothers Commercial, if you remember that from way back in the 80s. So 1985, and it was just a administrative, temporary job in the afternoons that I took, and I was actually typing up purchase agreements on a typewriter with carbon copy and whiteout. So
I love it.
So anyway, long time ago, but I did that for probably 2 years, and then as I watched the brokers that were there on the commercial side, selling industrial buildings at the time, that's kind of where I got my start, believe it or not, I thought, I could do this. I don't know why I thought that, but I ended up getting my real estate license the day after I graduated from college, and I started working there, and just really, got right into the business. There were a few brokers there that were mentors of mine that kind of helped, a little bit at the time to kind of give me some direction.
And who are they?
So Dave Bruce,
okay,
and Ken Beersdorf, Anna Murray was there at the time. So I got a lot of assistance and just help with listings and kind of understanding the business a little bit. But being right out of college and on straight commission, it's tough, it's hard. I knew that I needed some training. And so at the time, CBRE was Coldwell Banker Commercial. And so I knew I wanted to get in there because they had a training program. They had all the different sectors, retail and office, industrial, all that, so that you could kind of, determine, what you liked at least, and then get through their training program. So 4 years after being with Thorpe Brothers, I finally got hired. I remember them telling me several times, just go sell vacuum cleaners for a while. Just get some sales experience. And I said, well, I already am. I'm already in the, commercial industry. So anyway, an opening did finally come up, and it was in retail. So I took it, yep. So I went from industrial to retail, went through their training program. I worked with Peter Block there at the time. And really, I just learned kind of the retail business and got a lot of good, commercial real estate training. So I was there for probably 7 years or so. From there, Coldwell Banker actually downsized in the late 80s, early 90s. That was then when I wasn't super fond of retail, just because I was the low man on the totem pole, to say, and you'd kind of be there on Friday afternoons taking the calls for, the dog grooming shops and that type of thing. So anyway.
I know well.
And yeah, and so that process. But as they kind of downsized, there was an opportunity. That's when I actually went to Northco, where Reed was for a long time, and we did a lot of work together on the office side. And I spent 12 years there, and
Wow.
It kind of became Grubb & Ellis Northco at the time, and that's when I did a lot of healthcare stuff at Southdale Medical and Edina. That's where kind of that Pentagon work and stuff came in. So it was quite a while before I'd even gotten to that point. And so at that point in time, I learned a lot about the owner side, development, office, and really like the healthcare piece of it. That's kind of where it came in for me, because I felt like, it was such a niche that the players in that sector, needed kind of so much guidance and advisory. It wasn't like working with corporate office groups that would maybe have a real estate department, and they were, a little more sophisticated. So I felt that the value, that I could add to those transactions kind of in that little niche market, it was just more interesting to me, and I just felt that was a good spot. And I think just, really kind of understanding, that, I guess just that sector, the hospital systems even needing help and assistance trying to figure out what to do in the independent clinics and the physicians and really the smaller clinics, that needed that help to understand the real estate and how they were always trying to figure that out kind of on their own. So to me, that just really felt like a good niche. And those transactions are, they take so long to put together that I think historically there just haven't been a lot of brokers that have had interest in it. Just saying, okay, is that ever going to get done, and am I going to be able to focus on that 100% of the time? And really make that a niche.
It's hard, right? I mean, just getting an audience with the decision makers is challenging, right?
Yeah, because they're the communication and the time, and when you can sit down with them and kind of working through some of those things that they really don't spend a lot of time on, just because they're in the healthcare sector, that's what they do, and they do it well, and they don't really want to spend a lot of time trying to figure out, financing and real estate and understanding where the best spot for them is going to be.
And financing is a big thing because the tenant improvements that are required.
Expensive.
Yeah, right.
Right. And there's not a lot of movement going on. I mean, once they do find a spot and put in that capital and invest in the space, they really don't want to move if they don't have to. And so it's a long-term decision and a big commitment. So you really want to try to help them out. So I really focused on that for quite some time, and ended up, where I am today, really just focused on partners and kind of just 100% sole focus on healthcare right now.
Yeah. And so how did you end up getting to Davis and becoming a partner in the firm?
Well, I had done over the years, just being in the healthcare kind of arena, done a lot of transactions with Mark Davis, who really kind of worked with Alina as their real estate advisor for 20 years or so. And then my other partner, Michael Sharp, came from Alina. He did run Alina's real estate department for probably 18 years. And when he was leaving Alina, he joined up with Mark. They came and talked to me about kind of creating I guess what we had called at the time kind of the trifecta of just really having all of the pieces of a really good team, and to be able to provide not only strategic planning for hospital systems and independent clinics, but understanding the development side, the ownership side, the brokerage side, and being able to kind of pull that all together and provide that kind of full service brokerage, and not have to do that under the umbrella of bigger companies that would have competing groups and things where that just really wasn't 100% the focus.
Yeah.
So
it really is the only firm in town that's really just healthcare, right? I mean,
that's full service. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Really interesting.
Yeah. And then we grew that. At the time, Mark wasn't interested in doing property management, and I said, when we work with our clinic groups, we develop these buildings. We want to provide really good quality property management, and so we grew that as well. And so now we've really got everything, and we actually did take another step to add architecture, which you normally don't see either. But we really wanted to be able to provide fit planning and design for these groups that we work with without having to wait, too long for projects. And
you've got that in-house.
We have that in-house.
Wow, that's impressive. I did not know that. Yeah, that's really great. Well, and so talk to me a little bit about the nuances. We've talked a little bit about, TIs and that kind of thing, and some of but the medical world or healthcare facilities. What else is kind of unique about that particular property type?
Well, it's interestingly enough, it's become more like retail, where historically there were medical office buildings attached to hospitals. And that's where everybody went for everything, not just acute care, it was everything. So you'd have these facilities that, were controlled a lot of times by the hospital systems, owned by the hospital systems, and then they would have some independent clinics that would affiliate with them, and that's where you'd see some of these other groups.
Like specialties?
Right,
and that kind
like
of thing?
specialty.
Okay.
So that they'd have hospital, surgery, urgency care, urgent care, and then everything, and then primary care and specialty care. Now, over time, that has changed just because of convenience and cost. The hospitals, if they've sold off maybe some of the medical buildings that are on their campuses and only own, the core of the hospital, you've got other kind of REIT investors that have invested in these, and that used to be the quality investment that the big REITs were looking for. They wanted those on-campus buildings that the hospitals had to lease that space, and that's what they were looking for. That also has changed because, again, there's been so much ambulatory surgery development where the surgery now is off-campus, it's off-site, it's day surgery, so that they can do it more cost-effectively, it's more convenient, it's a nicer facility, newer, in a convenient, area, good parking and access and so on. So it's just a whole different feel. And so now those have kind of become kind of those outpatient medical facilities that, that are attractive to the larger REITs and independent investors. Because those leases are long, it's usually new construction. There aren't a lot of things that can be retrofit,
Sure.
for that type of use, because you've got ORs and surgery and all that type of stuff. An example of that would be our Exchange Medical Building in St. Louis Park that was built for Surgery Center of Minnesota, which came from Centennial Lakes in Edina. And the groups that do surgery in that surgery center are ENT groups, eye groups. And so you've got all the specialties there, and then they utilize, the surgery center that was built there. And so you've got a good,
they all use the same surgery center?
if the physicians have ownership in that surgery center, then yes, they'll use that.
Okay,
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it depends. Depends on who's kind of part of it and what physicians can be part of that. And that's surgical, SCA, Surgical Care Associates. So,
Okay,
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So when you say that it's become more retail, I know that we've talked to different groups and doctors, and sometimes they've wanted to be more independent, and then they've been gobbled up by groups. And like, what is the landscape of that, or is it more popular or attractive right now for people to be operating independently? I think even there was some talk with COVID of separating some of the different, so not everybody was going to the same place for the
Right.
same kind of services.
Right.
Or
So it cycles. I mean, there was a time when the hospital systems were acquiring independent clinics. It was really hard to continue to practice as an independent clinic because they had to invest in electronic records, and they had to, again, find that right facilities and deal with all the other stuff you have to as a practice versus just seeing patients. So there was a trend for those hospital systems to acquire those practices. It's changed a little bit. Minnesota is pretty sophisticated. We've got we have the biggest specialty groups in the country when it comes to like neurology and eye and orthopedic.
really?
And so they're very strong. And so they do work with the hospital systems and this, back and forth. But we're seeing a little bit of a trend where some of the physicians, if they just, want to do something different and be a little bit more independent, kind of leave the systems. But the systems are they're taking care of all that stuff if a physician just wants to deal with that. But here we do see a lot of really strong independent clinics. You don't necessarily see that in a lot of other markets where the hospital systems really control and run everything.
And you work all over the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
And are doing development all over the country too, right?
We've done most of our development has been kind of regional.
Okay.
But we do management in other markets.
Really?
We have management. We have an office in Phoenix, and so we do management for a partner of ours down there that owns 5 medical office buildings. We have an office in North Dakota. So yeah, it depends.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me about you're an investor as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you've just taken such full advantage of this industry and done all of the things that I don't know. How do we become you? I mean,
Right.
Right? Like, I want to be more like you.
Okay. Well, I think because we have my partners and I have really come from the brokerage side and the advisor side, we understand, like for our clients, what it takes to put together a project that works. I mean, it needs to work for the owner and the developer, but it also needs to work for the clinic. And I think on the development side, there's a sense that, development costs X, and so the rate's going to be this, and the operating is going to be this, and if it's really expensive to build it out, we're only going to provide, this tenant improvement allowance. And from a clinic standpoint, the physicians really don't have any way to generate more revenue unless they can figure out other services to provide. I mean, they can only see so many patients during the day. They can only afford so much rent if they're not surgery groups or, high-end specialty groups. And so that, from our standpoint, we thought, can we provide, seamless service that would allow independent clinics, even hospital systems, where we could help facilitate the equity side, the financing piece, putting the project together, knowing what that transaction needs to look like so it'll work for the system and it'll work for an independent clinic. They can have ownership or not.
Interesting.
We will partner with them if they just want to do a lease. We're just kind of, here's what this looks like, and we have every single relevant lease comparable in the market so that we can really show what does this need to look like, to make this work for all the parties involved. And so what we found over the years is sometimes that's hard to do if you're just saying, well, here's a developer out there, and maybe that developer hasn't even developed medical office. And so you just don't really know how that's all going to come together. So we've been able to really look at that and provide it and be completely transparent about cost, and also still analyze the entire market. If there was a better site, or we couldn't purchase a site if a group wanted to own. And a lot of these independent groups really do now understand that they're driving the development. They should get some benefit of that, either through distributions and rent, or on sale, or whatever that looks like. So we've done everything, from just, a lease for a group and done the development. We've partnered with and held longer term. We've developed and owned in groups that actually wanted to sell and just, and
cash
move
out,
on to do the next thing. We've done that as well. Or if they want to continue to own because it's their kind of hub, and we can then move on and do other development, they can buy us out. I mean, we have all kinds of different strategies, and it's really what's the best for the clinic or the system. Like, what are they trying to accomplish, and how can we help them do that?
So you're not out finding a site for, this would make a good medical site, and we're going to develop it, and then we're going to find the users. Your developments are user driven.
Historically, they have been very user driven. I mean, you can't do speculative medical office; it's too expensive. Space could sit empty for a really long time just because of the affiliations and the synergies that different groups have. They won't go into the same buildings with each other and stuff. So I mean, there's all those kind of tenant mix things that you need to think about. But we have in the past, if we feel like there is a great site in a market that we know is kind of up and coming, and we just know that we've got to have it to kind of make it work or be competitive, we have done that.
You've tied up some sites that you just know will be good, and then kind of find the user before you build it, right? So you're just, but you're tying up the site first.
Right.
But most of the time it's user driven.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how many transactions do you think you've done in your career? I mean, a couple, right?
Yeah. I don't even No.
So talk to me
I
about,
probably do about 100 transactions a year.
okay. And we won't do the math.
So times
We won't do the math.
times 37 or 40 or something, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't even believe. But so talk to me about your craziest deal or some crazy deal that you've worked on that sticks out in your head.
I know. Well, it was interesting. I've had this question before, like on different panels, and it's like, what's like your horror story, like your broker horror story or worst thing that ever happened? And I'm like, I had to think about that, and I'm like, I haven't had any bad deals. I mean, I really, honestly, I've had challenging or frustrating, or it used to be a deal would die and then come back, and now it dies 5 times and comes back. So there's those things that they're difficult, but that's kind of the fun of the business, is just the creativity of trying to solve for each side and coming up with something and then being able to put it together. That's why it's so interesting and so different and unique.
Couldn't agree more.
Every single day, But I did think of the other day one that was like, maybe it was more of like a lesson, where it was early on when I had worked really hard to put together a clinic deal, and it was in an office showroom building, and it was probably one of the first deals I had done or something, but so we got the whole thing set up, did the plan, signed the lease and whatnot, and I had never even thought to check zoning to see if the clinic was actually an approved use in the building and in the city code. Anyway, so it wasn't. So it was like a few sleepless nights of, all right, now what do we do? Luckily, all we had to do was go in for, conditional use permit, and it was underneath, some, like the other, some kind of office showroom or tech or, use. So we got through it. But those kind of things, just those things that you just don't think about, and then you learn those kind of over time.
Yeah,
that's being challenging, but what if you couldn't have fixed that? You've got a 10-year lease that this group would have to deal with no right to terminate, or, I suppose we could sublet, but that's a giant headache. So,
yeah, and landlords aren't so much, the landlord doesn't typically represent what the zoning offers. It's really bears on the tenant. So they sign that lease, and in theory, if they couldn't do that there, they would have, the landlord's not going to be like, oh, that's okay.
Sure,
you go away.
We'll just rip up the lease. I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, that's crazy if that's like one of the few things that you can think of like that.
I don't know. There's always, I think, no matter what, there's always huge challenges and frustrations. And as I've worked with and trained, many, many junior brokers over the years, you can see when there's that panic, or what did I do, or how should I do it, or you can just work through a lot of those things, and you just know everything will work out in the end, one way or the other. And so you just kind of have to manage through that, and just managing expectations on all sides too. You get real creative and, be the calming piece of getting stuff completed.
And so when there is that situation with a junior broker, what kind of advice do you give to them?
Well, and I spend, quite a bit of time on the several that I've kind of worked through and trained. They really spend a lot of time with me. Anne, who I just mentored, I had her in my office, for a good year and a half.
Wow.
And so there's just kind of that learning and watching that you don't get. And I think COVID created huge challenge with that. We all could still do what we did, but we did it differently, and it really impacted, I think, a few of the, even a couple of the junior people that we had. And it's just hard. I think you just need to kind of shadow and listen and understand and kind of work them through it. And I think for younger brokers, it's just really asking questions. There isn't really any right answer, and a lot of times you still come up with stuff you haven't seen before. There's still stuff I see that I'm like, how could I have not ever negotiated that in a lease and at some point in time?
Right.
Where did that come from?
Yeah. So every day.
Yeah.
I always say,
or a sale transaction or something where it just is okay, that's good that we got through that, and that we know that.
Yeah,
So,
people that work with me sometimes say, when this happens, what do you usually do? And I'm like, gosh, I'm not sure I've seen that before. Let's think about it. And then it's really just like, let's just look at the facts and try to take any emotion out of it, right? And just
Right.
say, okay, what does this side need? What does this side need? What are the facts here? And then, like you said, that's part of the fun, is trying to come up with the solution.
Yeah, creative. And a lot of times it's like a few days later, all of a sudden you'll be like, okay, maybe that would work, and maybe both parties would be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And so just really that kind of unique, creative thinking is fun.
Yeah.
When you think when everything's falling apart and you have to come back and go, all right, what do we do now? Like, what do we do now? This makes the most sense. I mean, some things don't happen. I mean, they won't. But, if you really, really, really think it works best, good for both parties, how do you figure out how to get it done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome that you've been doing this for a couple of years and you still think that's fun.
I know. It's like, when are you going to retire? I'm like, I don't know. What would I do?
Well, what would you have done when you graduated from, what would you have done if you didn't do this business? I mean,
No, I have no idea. I've never done anything else. I don't know.
You're so made, you just do it so well. Are there other challenges within the industry? I mean, you've kind of tackled everything, right? Owning the business, owning the real estate, development, kind of, as time has gone on, you've added on these different layers. Do you have any thoughts about other things you'd like to accomplish kind of in the future?
Well, like we talked about earlier, like getting, my offspring to take over someday. And continuing kind of that training so that, it isn't just lost when your business is gone. Like you probably think about that as well. Like, you don't want to do that forever. You don't want to work as hard as you have over the years. How do you transition a little bit so that you are bringing in that younger group? And I think we always think, because we've been in it for so long, we know everything and we know it the best, and the way we used to do things is still the best. And that's not necessarily true, especially as I watch these younger brokers come in, and the stuff that I've learned from them. It's really neat.
Yeah.
And so I think just that piece of it is, how do you still do the parts of the business that you love, and then also have more time for family? And that's always hard. But if you get that figured out, I think that works really
Have you
well.
gotten that figured out?
Not totally, no. I'm getting better. I'm certainly getting them better. Yep.
It's a challenge, right? You and I both love to work. And it's hard to. It's hard to find other things to do that are just, when you're that driven.
Right.
Right.
And I think the thing that has changed a little bit, and I think maybe that's just technology. You always felt like you had to be here in the office, like doing everything. Now, just you don't have to do that. So you can work a little bit if you add travel in, and work from other places and do those types of things. So I think that's really helped a lot.
Yeah.
And then also given the ability for more family time.
Yeah. And your daughter's interning with you this summer?
Yes. Yeah.
Does that go well, or is there?
That's usually, honestly, we're pretty similar, and we have some challenges not at work. Just the mom thing, whatever. But
Right.
But yeah, at work, I think for her, it's maybe an exciting opportunity to learn more and kind of see what I do all day. And then now that she's really gotten, the courses and stuff that she's studying right now. If that would have been around way back when, oh my goodness.
What was your degree in?
Psychology.
Yeah. Well, that probably helps a little bit.
That helps a lot. So I have that covered.
But your daughter's in the real estate program or development program in Denver?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of classes like that back in the day.
I think there might have been one or two colleges that actually even had a real estate degree.
Right.
So now there's, full majors in the business colleges that focus on and the whole spectrum. They'll do construction management and finance and development and architecture and real estate. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So it's exciting.
Yeah, that is fun.
Yeah.
What kind of projects are you working on today? What are some things that are going on?
Well, we just finished 4 new developments. We finished up one in Maple Grove that was a surgery center for Alina and Surgical Care Associates. And then we just finished a project in Maple Grove for Minnesota Gastroenterology and Minnesota Oncology. And so that's full, and that's right up by the hospital. And then we just opened up a 16,000-foot building in Wayzata.
Now, do you have ownership interest in all these?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, good for you.
Yep. And so Wayzata was a little project that Mark and I had been really trying to find a piece of land in Wayzata for about 10 years. And so we finally found one and got rid of an older office building that I actually used to work in when I was in high school, when I worked for my uncle for Edina Realty.
Oh, that's funny.
So anyway, which is kind of interesting. And so that's a little specialty building that we've got a little bit of space left in. And then we've got a big project for Alina and Minnesota Gastroenterology in Lakeville, which is about a little over 100,000 feet. So a lot of medical coming to Lakeville. And then we've got a building in Eagan that we're going to build a surgery center for Midwest Surgery, which is a joint venture between St. Paul Eye and Midwest ENT. So there are a lot of specialty groups, and all this, again, is surgery driven. I mean, it's
Really?
ambulatory surgery. It's having clinic and surgery in the same spot and having it in a convenient location where their patients live. And so that type of care, getting closer to patients and having a facility, like what we do, instead of, historically development has been, here's the building, fit your program in it. And we do it the other way around. We do it, what's your program? What's your layout? Because a lot of times, like, the surgery needs to be by this and this, and then you get a bigger kind of first floor footprint, and then we'll build the building around it. And then, go up, or if the area can handle more space, we think we can lease it to others and keep the rate down by doing a bigger building, we'll try to do that.
Interesting.
But it's really a lot of these groups spending a lot of time, especially during COVID, looking at strategy and trying to understand, where do we need to be for the future? Where's our patient demographic? So again, it's kind of more like that retail study. Like, where are our people?
Yeah.
And then how do we get there? And how do we do it in a way that is cost effective? And how do we get that done?
Yeah, and I
So
mean,
we solve
costs
that
are
problem for 'em.
skyrocketing, and
Yes.
interest rates, and I mean, you're starting these development projects, and interest rate might be X, and by the time you get it done, it's a totally different.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
managing all that has to be one of your biggest challenges now.
Today it is. I mean, the big challenge right now is, how do you underwrite?
If
They cannot tell us what interest rates are going to be
when you get your permanent financing.
What are we working with here? So they got to get that figured out, so that we can kind of keep moving, these projects forward. There's projects, things can get done, and now we're, just with supply chain problems and interest rates, as we said, and construction pricing. I mean, you start to look at net rates that just get out
Crazy.
of reach.
Yeah.
They get out of reach for where these clinics, can afford to pay. So we run into a little bit of problem there. But we'll manage through that and work through that and try to balance timing.
Yeah, and is that different than anything you've experienced kind of in your career, or have you seen?
I don't think we've had everything.
Okay.
I mean,
Right.
in 2008 and 9, you had the financial crisis and you had some of those challenges, but you didn't have everything else.
Right.
So I think right now we certainly are getting hit with everything. So
Yeah.
we certainly see probably a little bit of slowdown but these projects take 3 to 5 years. And so sometimes, if we get started and finished, we're going to be in good shape. I think the challenge probably for existing owners is if they've got debt, coming up, and all of a sudden, they were at 3% and now they're at 6 or 7, or what do and nothing's changed with the building. It's still full. It's still cash flowing.
And the same leases.
So we're not in the same situation as just standard office space. Medical now is actually trying to separate itself from it and become its own asset class, because office is so challenged right now. The buildings are full. They're nationally, they're 98% occupied. The rent gets paid, and have a lot of, bankruptcies and delinquencies. You've got tenants that are in there operating, and, they need to be in their space.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't have any of those challenges, but Wall Street is still kind of, nicking at the big REIT owners saying, oh, your leases are too long or your annual increases aren't high enough. And those, so you're getting a little bit of challenge there, which I think is not really warranted based on where the assets are right now. Just like industrial has been doing really well, and even retail.
Yeah.
And so kind of trying to differentiate itself and maybe name itself, a medical building category or an outpatient medical facility category versus medical office building.
Interesting. Yeah. It's
get out from under. It's always been kind of a subcategory of office,
right.
and now it's a better, stronger asset class.
Yeah.
Through lots of recessionary timeframes, it's pretty recession proof, but right now certainly is challenging.
So do you feel like there will be some buildings that'll have a hard time getting refinanced? And
I think so.
Will there be opportunities
I think so.
for people in that?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, especially, if they can't infuse capital, they might have to sell.
Yeah.
So that could be an opportunity.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Well, it'll be, I think, an
Haunting.
Interesting couple of years, and you still are having fun doing it.
I do. It's all good, right? I mean, there are days, but.
Yeah, right.
And it's, I think in our market too, maybe not necessarily in a lot of others, we do have a really good commercial real estate kind of camaraderie. We do work well together. It's competitive, but it's still respectful, and it just makes it a fun.
It does make it fun.
Fun industry or sector. So
yeah,
I'm always like, rah rah.
Right. We're all just a little crazy, but
yeah.
we have fun together. I think for sure.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. This is fascinating.
Thank you for chatting with me.
I love the fact that you're loving this business, and with all of that you've already accomplished, and you're just still, it's still like you're still having fun.
Well, that's what it's all about. If it's not, then there's got to be something else to do, right?
Right. I don't know what that is though.
Exactly.
Thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you.